Billionaire CEO goes undercover, orders meal at his diner, but stops when he hears the black waitress crying in the kitchen. What really happens when the owner of a diner chain walks in unnoticed and orders a meal like any regular customer? Elias Moore wasn't just any diner owner. He was the quiet force behind Harbor Bites, a local chain with 14 locations across Oregon. For 10 years, he'd built his brand on trust, comfort, and community. But lately, something felt off. Customer reviews hinted at rudeness, cold food, and tired service. His regional supervisors dismissed it all as growing pains. But Elias had a gut feeling, and he trusted that more than spreadsheets. So one rainy afternoon, he drove 2 hours to the Eugene branch, a modest spot far from corporate eyes, where most of the staff wouldn't recognize him. He left behind his press suit and public persona, trading them for a weathered hoodie, jeans, and a pair of thick glasses. With a week's worth of stubble and zero fanfare, he pushed open the door. The bell above him jingled. Inside, the diner buzzed with the usual lunchtime rush. Clinking silverware, murmured conversations. The booths looked worn, the smiles looked forced. A young waitress with tired eyes and a faded name tag walked up to him. "Welcome to Harbor Bites," she said. "What can I get you today?" Elias looked up, pretending to study the menu. "Just coffee. Black," he replied with a faint smile. He could already feel it. The energy in the room wasn't right. It wasn't just about aesthetics or cleanliness. There was something deeper, something tired in the air. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from one long shift, but from weeks, maybe months, of being pushed too hard and thanked too little. The waitress scribbled his order without meeting his eyes and shuffled back toward the counter. Elias leaned back in the booth, letting his gaze sweep across the diner. A couple bickered quietly at the next table. 2 teenagers scrolled on their phones, their plates half-eaten. An elderly man sat alone, his coffee refill long overdue. But it was the staff that held Elias's attention. They moved with a mechanical rhythm, no lightness in their steps, no small talk, no laughter. The dishwasher clanked too loudly in the back. A server dropped a fork and flinched. The manager, a tall man in his late 30s, stood behind the register with a frown on his face and a phone in his hand, scrolling like the world around him didn't matter. This wasn't the Harbor Bites Elias had envisioned when he started. Back then, it had all been about warmth, handwritten notes on checks, locally sourced pastries, knowing customers by name. It wasn't meant to be perfect. It was meant to be human. No? It felt like a machine on autopilot. His coffee arrived, lukewarm and in a chipped mug. He thanked the waitress, Isla. Her name tag read, but she had already turned away. He sipped slowly, watching everything. A manager who didn't manage. A staff that had learned to do without direction. Customers who weren't necessarily angry, but weren't returning, either. That bothered him more than if they'd been yelling. Elias wasn't here to judge them. He was here to understand them, to feel what they felt. No formal complaint could have shown him this. No sanitized report or chart would have painted the picture he now saw with his own eyes. The rain outside had softened to a mist, fogging the diner windows and cloaking the world beyond in a gray stillness. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Harbor Bites was half full now, just enough customers to stretch the staff, but not enough to create a rhythm. Elias Moore sat quietly in his booth, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm coffee mug, watching. It didn't take long for the pattern to reveal itself. At the center of the storm was Isla. She moved like someone used to holding the world together with one hand and carrying a tray in the other. Slim build, maybe mid-20s, with a loose ponytail that frayed at the edges and sneakers that squeaked across the greasy linoleum floor. Her name tag was faded, her apron slightly stained, but her smile, though thin, hadn't quite disappeared. She was everywhere. One moment, she was wiping down a high chair. The next, she was calming a customer who had been waiting too long for fries. She juggled 3 tables, refilled a coffee pot, and grabbed clean silverware from a busbin, all in a single breath. Her eyes scanned constantly, like she was waiting for something to go wrong before it did. Behind her, leaning against the counter like a king without a crown, was Trent, mid-30s, tall, smug. The kind of manager who didn't need to bark orders because his presence alone demanded compliance. His posture said it all, arms crossed, phone in hand, earbuds in, giving Isla the occasional barked instruction without ever lifting a finger himself. "Table 6 needs refills," he muttered, without looking up from his phone. Isla didn't respond. She was already halfway there. Elias watched every detail unfold. There was no team here. Only one person working while another monitored her like a lazy referee. The imbalance was jarring. Elias took a slow sip of his coffee, letting the bitterness settle on his tongue. It tasted like the atmosphere, burnt and tired. Then it happened. A young family seated near the front booth waved Isla over. 2 kids, a mother, and a father, clearly out for a treat. But the father was frowning. He poked at his food, pushing it around the plate. Isla arrived just as the mother spoke up. "I'm sorry, but this is cold," she said politely, holding up a plate of eggs and toast. "I really do apologize," Isla said with a gentle, practiced voice. "Let me fix that for you right away." She turned quickly, already heading to the kitchen, when Trent's voice cut through the air, sharp, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you double-check before taking it out, maybe we wouldn't have this problem again." The word again stung like a slap in a quiet room. Isla froze for half a second. She didn't look at him, didn't argue, just disappeared behind the swinging kitchen door. Trent smirked and returned to scrolling. Elias felt something shift in the pit of his stomach. He wasn't looking for confrontation. He didn't come to ambush his staff or storm in with grand speeches. But this moment, this public humiliation of someone who was clearly trying, spoke louder than anything else he'd seen so far. Isla returned moments later with a new plate, steam rising, smile still intact. She placed it gently in front of the father and even offered the kids extra crayons for their placemats. The mother thanked her. Elias, watching from the corner, jotted a note on a napkin beside his cup. One holds the house together. The other tears it down silently. The rest of the diner operated in slow decline. Elias noticed little things that once would have never passed at Harbor Bites. A broken syrup dispenser. Napkins running low at the drink station. No music playing. Just the clatter of plates and the low hum of customer discontent. But through it all, Isla moved like a current against the tide. She asked customers how their meals were, even the grumpy ones. She offered a free cookie to a toddler after he dropped his milk. She wiped crumbs off a booth with the edge of her sleeve when no cloth was in sight. She smiled when she had no reason to. And Trent? He leaned, barked, watched, and smirked. When the busboy tripped and spilled a tray of glasses near the kitchen, Trent didn't help. Just shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable," loud enough to embarrass the kid. Elias tapped his finger gently against the mock. No one had noticed him yet, which was exactly what he wanted. There was no magic fix for a broken work culture. No policy that could reverse months of emotional erosion. But there were always signals, clear, human signals, of who still cared. And right now, that signal had a name, Isla. From his vantage point, Elias noticed how customers began to catch on too. One woman at the counter left a tip in cash, then slid a small sticky note under the saucer before leaving. A teenage boy nodded at Isla as she passed, clearly grateful for her kindness when she helped him earlier. People noticed good, even when the management didn't. Even when it was buried under exhaustion and bad leadership. Elias knew he couldn't show his hand yet. This was just the beginning. The deeper truth hadn't fully surfaced, but already he was seeing the pressure cracks. Trent wasn't the cause, but he was the rot making them spread. And Isla? She was the glue keeping the place from falling apart. For now. Elias folded the napkin he had been writing on, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and leaned back as another plate of food passed his table. He didn't need to speak. Not yet. The truth was revealing itself, one quiet shift at a time. And the man in the hoodie was listening to every unspoken word. The soft gray of the afternoon had darkened into a deep charcoal by early evening. Outside, headlights flickered across rain-slick streets. Inside the Eugene branch of Harbor Bites, the world had begun to tilt. Elias Moore, still just a man in a hoodie and thick glasses to everyone else, remained tucked in his booth. His cup of coffee had long gone cold, but he hadn't touched it in over an hour. He wasn't there to eat. He was there to see, and what he was seeing now, as the dinner rush kicked in, was something close to collapse. It began slowly. A few extra customers trickled in, then more. Couples, families, teens from the nearby high school. The bell above the entrance seemed to chime every minute now. Booths filled up. The kitchen roared to life. The hum of quiet conversation grew into overlapping waves. Orders hit the pass at a speed that would have overwhelmed even the best staff team. But this team? It was a skeleton crew. And the only one keeping it together was Isla. She moved faster now. Her ponytail had loosened completely, strands sticking to her forehead. Her apron had 3 new stains. Her voice, though still soft, was breathless. "Can I get you anything else?" "Coming right up." "Sorry for the wait," were just a little backed up. Her words were kind, but her eyes gave her away. They darted constantly. She was watching for dropped plates, missed orders, or worse, Trent. Trent had moved from idle smirking to loud declarations. He barked updates that weren't helpful, announced ticket numbers like a game show host, and criticized everything Isla did, loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. Order for table 4's still not out? What are you even doing back there? That wasn't directed at Isla. It was aimed at the kitchen. But it set the tone. At 6:23 p.m., a child in a booster seat knocked over his root beer. The glass tumbled onto the tiled floor with a sharp crash and a flood of sticky soda. The mother gasped, reaching for napkins. Before anyone else could react, Isla was there. Napkins in hand, crouching down, assuring the mother, "It's okay, it happens all the time." She smiled at the little boy, gave him a wink, and began mopping it up with practiced speed. That's when it happened. Trent, standing just a few feet away with his arms crossed, barked at her. Loud. Sharp. Enough to make several heads turn. Maybe if you'd stop babying every customer and start doing your job, we wouldn't be this far behind. Silence for half a second. The mother's eyes widened. A teenager at a nearby table snorted in disbelief. Isla, still on her knees, holding a fistful of soaked napkins, froze. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes stayed low. Elias sat perfectly still. This wasn't a one-time slip. It was muscle memory. Trent had said things like this before, probably many times. And Isla, she had learned to absorb it. She stood slowly, tossing the napkins into a bin, and returned to the kitchen. No words. No protest. Just swallowed dignity. And Elias felt something stir. Not anger. Not outrage. Grief. Because this place, this diner, was never meant to become this. The kitchen doors flapped as Isla pushed through. Inside, the scene was unraveling. Darren, the young line cook, was elbow-deep in orders. His apron clung to him with sweat, his hair tied back tightly. He moved quickly but carefully, no wasted steps, no loud complaints. Every now and then, he reached over to another station to help the prep cook who was falling behind. He wasn't in charge, but he was clearly holding things together. 3 BLTs, 1 no mayo, 1 sub fries, 1 gluten-free bun. Darren called out. "Are we out of cheddar again?" Someone muttered. "Tell Trent," Darren replied. "Or don't. He won't do anything." In the chaos, Elias scribbled quietly into his notepad. Leadership failure. Toxic culture. Those words came naturally now. Trent, meanwhile, had stationed himself by the coffee machine, halfway between the kitchen and the counter, barking updates like he was running a war room. "We're out of clean mugs. Darren, you hearing me? We're short on staff. Trent. Excuse me? You think this is my fault?" Darren didn't respond. Elias looked up again. A man at table 5 raised his hand, irritated. "Excuse me. This was supposed to be no onions." Trent rolled his eyes and turned to Isla, who had just returned with a tray of drinks. "Fix it." That's all he said. No apology to the guest. No responsibility taken. Just a command handed off to someone already drowning. Isla took the plate, gave the customer a polite nod, and vanished again. The temperature in the diner felt like it had risen 5 degrees. The fryer hissed. The air smelled of grease and tension. Customers were growing impatient. Eyes flicked to watches and phones. Small complaints began to ripple outward. "Do you think they forgot our table? This is the second time they've messed up. I knew we should have gone to the place across town." Elias heard everyone. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was an environment rotting from the inside. Trent had stopped being a manager a long time ago, if he ever was one. He was now a bottleneck, a mood killer, a silent permission slip for burnout. And Darren, Isla, and the others? They were surviving despite him. Elias pressed the pen to his notepad again. This place isn't failing because of the staff. It's failing because they're abandoned. By 7:04 p.m., the kitchen was 2 orders behind, with a third printed ticket jammed in the printer. Isla's movements had slowed. Her shoulders slumped. The bounce in her step was gone. Elias could see it now, plain as day. Every customer here was forming an opinion. Most wouldn't say anything. They'd eat their meal, pay their bill, and never return. And up top, the regional managers? They wouldn't hear about it. Trent would log in a few fake feedback forms, blame a shortage, and move on. Unless someone stopped the cycle. Unless someone was watching. And Elias was. At 7:15 p.m., a plate of chicken tenders hit the floor near the pass. The kitchen had overfilled the tray. No one reacted. Except Darren. He stooped, grabbed a rag, and cleaned it up before stepping behind Isla to help refill the drink station without being asked. Elias circled another name in his notes. Darren equals leader. Doesn't need a title. Outside, the rain had started again. Customers filed out quietly, some shaking their heads. A few left tips. One couple didn't. Inside, Trent was already back on his phone. Elias glanced down at his notes, neatly packed on the diner-branded napkin. He folded it once, slid it into the inside pocket of his hoodie, and stood. No one noticed him leaving. Not yet. The dinner rush had passed, but the weariness remained. The clatter of dishes was softer now, replaced by the low hum of conversation and the occasional sputter of the coffee machine trying to stay alive. Outside, dust crept along the windows. Street lights blinked on one by one, casting pale reflections across the diner's glass facade. Elias Moore was still in his corner booth, put up slightly, glasses fogged from the humidity. To anyone else, he looked like a tired traveler sipping his second cup of coffee. But beneath the worn hoodie, his mind was sharper than ever. He wasn't just watching now. He was listening. This was his favorite part. Not the confrontation, not the corporate cleanup that would follow, but this, the quiet unraveling of truths. The small conversations. The remarks people only make when they think no one important is listening. To his left, two women sat in a booth, eating slowly. They wore matching scrubs, hospital IDs tucked into their jackets. "I swear, every time we come here, she's still on shift," one whispered, glancing toward the waitress. "Isla," the other replied. "She was here last Thursday night too." Elias didn't turn his head, but his ears tuned in sharply. "She said she picked up a double. Again. That's 3 this week. I asked her when she last had a full day off. She laughed and said she forgot what that felt like." The first woman frowned. They can't keep doing that to her. "Where's their manager?" "On his phone," came the quiet answer. "Same place he always is." Elias's jaw clenched just slightly, hidden behind the rim of his cup. From the other side of the room came the low voices of 2 high schoolers seated at the counter. Their fries were half-eaten. One of them was drawing circles on a napkin with a spoon. "That guy Darren in the kitchen? He's cool," one said. "He gave me extra bacon last time. I heard he almost quit last month," the other responded. "Said they cut his hours without telling him. Like, they just didn't put him on the schedule and didn't say a word." "No way." "Yeah. He only stayed 'cause Isla asked him to. Said she'd be completely alone if he left." The first boy shook his head. "This place used to be better, man. My mom used to love coming here." Elias looked down at the notepad tucked beneath his napkin. He didn't write yet. He didn't need to. This part wasn't about documenting. It was about feeling the weight of the place through the voices of those who had no idea he was the one who built it. Near the coffee station, a young busboy in a sagging apron leaned against the wall, talking in hushed tones to the prep cook as they scraped plates into a trash bin. "She said the system was down when we clocked out yesterday," the busboy mumbled. "But payroll didn't fix it. I checked my stub, there's 2 hours missing." "That's the 3rd time," the prep cook said, not surprised. "No one ever does anything about it. They said they'd escalate it. They always say that." Elias closed his eyes briefly. The cracks were deep, deeper than he imagined. Not just overworked staff, but underpaid, underappreciated, lied to. This wasn't miscommunication. This was neglect. A voice brought him back. "Can I top that off for you?" He opened his eyes to find Isla standing beside his booth, coffee pot in hand, eyes glassy but still trying to shine. "Please," Elias said, nudging his cup forward. She filled it carefully, using a napkin to catch a drop before it could fall. That simple act, taking the extra second for a stranger's table, struck him all over again. "Busy night?" he asked, voice light. Isla chuckled softly, looking out at the mostly empty diner. "You could say that. You're good at this," Elias said. She looked surprised. "At what?" "Making people feel okay in chaos." Isla smiled, a tired one, but genuine. "That's nice of you to say. Most don't notice." "I think they do," Elias replied. "They just forget to tell you." She blinked once, like she wasn't sure how to respond. Then she gave a small nod and turned away. As she walked back toward the counter, Elias watched her gait, slightly uneven now. One foot dragging just a little more than the other. Fatigue wearing down even her body's rhythm. But still, she smiled at a customer on her way by. Still, she carried the weight of this place. Elias returned to his quiet corner and finally began writing. "She's the gravity here. Keeps everything from floating away." He underlined it twice. Then he turned to the next line. Staff not being paid for hours worked. Payroll glitches. Management blames system. Next line. Darren loyal to Isla, not to leadership. Speaks volumes. And again, complaints ignored. They never leave this place. That's a culture. A broken one. He put the pen down. The place had emptied out to just a few tables now. The kitchen was quiet. Trent was nowhere to be seen, probably in the back office, pretending paperwork made him important. But what Elias had heard tonight would stay with him far longer than any spreadsheet or customer survey ever could. This wasn't about bad service. It was about people forgotten. People like Isla, keeping the ship afloat while taking on water with a smile. People like Darren, staying for someone else's dignity. People like the busboy, already learning, at 16, that promises don't always pay you back. Elias leaned back and looked around the diner. The worn booths, the scratched menu boards, the tired lighting. But mostly, he looked at the people, those who were still trying, even when no one above them cared. And that was the problem. No one had been listening. But now someone was. And the man in the shadows was taking notes. The clock above the register ticked past 9 p.m. The dinner rush had long dissolved into silence. The tables were mostly empty now, just a few lingering customers sipping coffee or waiting for checks. The staff moved slower, the exhaustion etched into every step. Plates were stacked. Silverware clinked in soapy tubs. Lights buzzed above. Elias Moore sat quietly in his booth, watching the final moments of the shift unfold like the closing act of a long, painful play. He had seen enough, heard enough. The story had told itself. It was time. He stood, pushed in his chair, and made his way toward the counter. Isla, wiping down a laminated menu, glanced up. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked, still offering a tired but genuine smile. "Actually," Elias said gently, "would you mind gathering the staff for a moment? Everyone who's here. I'd like to speak with all of you." Isla blinked. Sure. Let me just, okay." Her confusion was clear, but she nodded and moved to the kitchen. Within minutes, the crew trickled out one by one. Darren came out from the back, towel over his shoulder. The busboy shuffled forward, looking unsure. Even the prep cook leaned against the wall, arms folded. Trent arrived last, still on his phone, clearly irritated. "What's this about?" he muttered, eyes narrowing. The staff circled near the counter. Isla stood to the side, arms loosely crossed, glancing around as if expecting someone to explain the sudden gathering. Elias took a breath. Then, in a calm, steady voice, he said, "My name is Elias Moore." A pause. "I own Harbor Bites. This diner is mine." The silence hit like a glass shattering on tile. Trent snorted out a laugh. "Yeah, right?" But no one else moved. Isla's eyes widened, flicking between his face and the others. The busboy's mouth dropped open slightly. Darren's expression didn't change, but his body straightened just enough to show he believed it. Trent scoffed again, stepping forward. "So what, you're the CEO now? Just slumming it in a hoodie? What's this, some kind of stunt?" Elias didn't flinch. "No stunt," he replied. "I've been here all day, observing, listening, watching how this place runs when no one thinks the owner is watching." He turned slightly, scanning the faces of his employees, faces that looked embarrassed, surprised, confused, hopeful. "I saw the cold plates. I heard the complaints that never make it past this room. I saw Isla cover more than any one person should be asked to do. And I watched Trent ignore every part of it. Mock it. Undermine it." Trent's smirk faded. "I heard about missed hours. About staff being told to clock out early, only to keep working. I listened to two teenagers at the counter talk about how your best cook nearly quit without a word. And not because of the job, but because of how the people doing it were treated." The room shifted. The air changed. Employees glanced at each other now, unsure if this was a warning or a reckoning. Trent stepped forward again, tone defensive. "Look, with all due respect, we've been short-staffed. These guys can't keep up. I do what I can." Elias raised one brow, then looked at Darren. "Is that true?" Darren didn't speak. He just shook his head slowly. Elias nodded once, then looked at Isla. "You've been holding this place together with nothing but kindness and duct tape," he said softly. "And I bet no one's told you thank you in weeks." Isla swallowed hard. Her lip trembled slightly, but she didn't speak. Elias turned back to the group. "This isn't how Harbor Bites was built. It's not who we are. And it ends tonight." Then, his eyes on Trent, he delivered the words that needed no build-up. "You're dismissed, Trent." Effective immediately. For a heartbeat, the room froze again. Trent's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked around for backup, but none came. He gave a small, bitter laugh and walked past Elias without another word, disappearing through the kitchen doors. Elias watched him go, then turned back to the staff. The busboy exhaled audibly. Isla stood motionless, processing. Darren gave a subtle nod, like something long overdue had finally snapped into place. "I didn't come here to punish," Elias said, voice softer now. "I came to learn what we've stopped listening to. And now that I know, we start over." He looked around at each face, one by one. No more missed pay. No more silence. No more pretending everything's fine. A hush hung over them, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was relief. The kind that sneaks in when someone finally hears you. And means it. The kitchen door swung shut behind Trent, his heavy footsteps echoing one last time before fading into silence. No one said a word. Elias stood at the center of the diner now. Not behind a podium, not in a boardroom, not on a stage. Just a man in a hoodie, standing on the same worn tile as everyone else, holding the weight of a company he'd nearly lost sight of. He didn't need to raise his voice. The room had already shifted. Turning to Isla, he met her eyes gently. "Thank you," Elias said, his voice even, steady, "for holding this place together when no one else would." Isla blinked, caught between exhaustion and emotion. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, as if unsure whether to fold or hide. She didn't speak, but her silence spoke volumes. Then Elias looked at Darren. "I saw what you did when no one was watching," he said. "The way you stepped in, the way you carried the weight for everyone else. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was right." Darren's jaw clenched, just a little. He nodded once, quiet but strong. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Creased, slightly damp from his jacket. He unfolded it slowly and placed it on the counter. "Starting next week," he said, "there's a new bonus system in place. Performance-based. Transparent. Fair. If you work hard, you'll see it on your check. Every hour will count. Every effort will matter." The staff glanced at one another, hesitant, stunned. The disbelief in the room was thicker than the grease in the fryer. Elias turned back to Darren. "You're being promoted to floor supervisor. Effective immediately." Darren looked down, nodded again this time, slower. Gratitude flickered across his face. He didn't smile. But he didn't need to. Then, Elias looked around the room, taking them all in, the busboy, the prep cook, even the part-time dishwasher who'd only joined last month and had barely spoken a word. "This place won't be fixed overnight," Elias said. "But it starts with truth, with listening, and with remembering that people are the reason we're here." For the first time in months, maybe longer, the staff felt it, presence. Not just of a man with power, but of someone who had chosen to stand with them, not above them. They hadn't expected justice. But justice, quietly and unmistakably, had arrived. The morning light came gently, spilling through the glass like a new beginning. Gone was the grim haze of the night before. In its place, soft golden rays filtered through freshly cleaned windows. Outside, birds flitted past the power lines. A breeze teased the American flag in its bracket by the entrance. The world looked ordinary. But inside Harbor Bites, everything had changed. It wasn't the smell of bacon or the sound of coffee brewing, it was the energy. The subtle shift in posture, in tone, in the way the air moved. The same tiled floors, the same booths with threadbare edges, the same chime above the door. And yet, the place felt lighter, warmer. Behind the counter, Darren stood tall, a crisp new name tag pinned to his chest, floor supervisor. His apron was spotless. His demeanor, still calm and quiet, carried a new kind of confidence. He moved with purpose, nodding at servers, checking orders, even chuckling when the syrup bottles refused to open. For someone who once blended into the background, today he was the center of quiet command. Near the front window, Isla stood between two young new hires. Both in fresh uniforms, eyes wide, nerves obvious. She was walking them through the register screen, patiently explaining the steps. She spoke slowly, smiled often, and every so often paused to say, "Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it." But her voice had changed. There was no edge of exhaustion, no buried frustration. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was leading. Above the drink station, a small laminated sign had been hung. The letters weren't fancy. The font was plain. But the words spoke louder than any logo ever could. "Your effort is seen." Simple. True. The morning crowd trickled in gradually. Families. a few solo regulars, a delivery driver reading a newspaper, and one man in a hoodie and glasses who took a quiet seat in the corner booth. No one gave him a second glance, which was exactly what Elias Moore wanted. He sat with a plate of pancakes and eggs, steam rising, butter melting at the edges. His coffee was hot this time, and served with a quiet "good morning" from one of the new hires, who smiled nervously but meant it. He took his time. Elias didn't need fanfare. He didn't want thanks. This, watching from the sidelines, was the reward. He glanced around. The busboy, once slow and unsure, now wiped tables with practiced rhythm. Darren nodded at him on his way by, and the kid straightened up proudly. In the kitchen, laughter. Not loud, not wild, but real. Someone had told a joke about the toaster, and it had landed. For a place that had once groaned under the weight of silence, the sound of joy, even small, awkward joy, was a revolution. Elias took another bite. He let the syrup soak into the corner of the pancake and watched as Isla walked past with a tray balanced perfectly on one hand. She didn't see him at first, but just as she reached the front, a customer asked her something, and she turned her head slightly and caught his eyes. A pause. Recognition. Her face lit up, not in surprise or confusion, but in understanding. She smiled. And this time, it wasn't a smile of survival. It wasn't one forced through fatigue or obligation. It was real, warm, grateful, light. Elias smiled back, just enough for her to know he saw it. Then he left cash under the salt shaker, folded neatly, and slid out of the booth without a word. He moved past the other diners without drawing attention, pushing open the door as the bell jingled overhead. Outside, the sun had broken free from the morning clouds. The diner behind him hummed softly. It didn't erupt into applause or freeze in awe. It just kept going. But better, kinder, stronger, because someone had finally listened. Because someone had quietly said, "This matters." And because now, the people who made it matter, Isla, Darren, and everyone behind those counters, knew they weren't invisible. As Elias stepped into the daylight, the wind picked up, tugging at the edge of his hoodie. He pulled it tighter and headed down the street, alone but content, never looking back. The shift had changed everything, not just for them, but for him too. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories coming your way. Drop your thought in the comments about what you feel of this story, and rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Also, let us know where you are watching from, as we would love to know how far our stories reach all over the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.